on the way to being free.
Hey everyone, and welcome to my tutorial on how to sew this beautiful bustier seashell top. In this video, I'll be guiding you through each step of the process, from cutting out the pattern pieces to adding the finishing touches. Before we begin, let's go over the materials you will need. And for this project I am using corset mesh, which is also known as power mesh or netting. However, you can choose any non-stretchy fabric that isn't too thick. We will also be using foam fabric to create bra cups for the bustier top. Make sure it matches your skin tone or fabric color. Additionally, we will need underwires. Be sure to select underwires that match the size that I listed in Appendix 1. Just choose the same underwire size as your pattern size. To enchase the underwires, we'll use bone casing that fits the underwires. We will also use ribbon to cover the boning on the bustier top. And finally, we need boning to provide structure and support to the bustier. You can choose either steel or plastic boning depending on your preference. First, start by cutting out the details from the fabric that you have chosen. And remember to cut the notches at the seam allowance because they are very useful for later steps. You'll need 2 pieces for the lining and 4 pieces for the outer fabric. Make a stitch as close to the edge as possible, and that is only to prevent them from sliding apart. It doesn't have to be perfect because we will be cutting off the seam allowance. The reason why I am using double fabric is to create a darker shade of power mesh. I would recommend using a white fabric pen to mark the pieces to be able to keep track of them later. And now we're going to the best part, and that is to sew the cup pieces together. Trim the seam allowance to approximately 3 to 4 millimeters on both the outer fabric and lining. You may also trim less or more, it's actually up to you. Just keep in mind that it will be visible.
On the way to being free.
Press the seam allowance away from the center, and the center is at the lowest point of the cup. The easiest way to iron a cup is to use a tailor's pressing hem for the bust. I actually made this one myself because it's almost impossible to find one like this in Europe. So if you don't have a tailor's hem, you can just use something round to press on. That's what I did before. Now it's time to make the foam cups. Cut out 2 pieces of foam fabric, that means 1 for each side. And as always, remember to cut notches. As you can see, there is no seam allowance on the inside of my cup patterns, because we will be zigzag stitching the foam cups. I prefer using a 3-step zigzag stitch for this, and some of you may already be familiar with this technique. So here are the settings on my sewing machine. I adjust the stitch length to 0.8 millimeters and the width to 7 millimeters. I have already prepared one of the cups to illustrate the next steps where we will cover up the foam cup. And as you can see, the lining is on the inner side of the foam cup, and this is how it would look if you choose to use only one layer of power mesh. For the first part, we will sew the top of the cup with the right sides together and by matching the stitches and notches.
On the way to being free.
Press the seam allowance to the lining and iron it. To prevent the seam allowance from slipping to the visible part of the cup, we need to stitch it down to the lining. Remember to always cut the threads. The fabric is sheer and the loose threads will be visible if they are not cut off. Also, cut off the seam allowance as close to the stitch as you can. Now let's move on to the part where we attach the fabric cup to the foam cup. It may seem like the foam cup is larger than the fabric cup, but that's normal. And to make the process easier, press the foam cup inwards so that you don't have to pull the fabric. Pin the wrong side of the fabric cup to the right side of the foam cup. And align the seams and notches. Sew the fabric to the foam by stitching as close to the edge as possible. Do not sew the top part together. And do not remove the pins yet. Iron the cup, but be careful not to iron over the pins to prevent damaging the fabric. And also, use your hands to gently shape the cup and press it into place while ironing. Remove the pins from the top part and adjust the fabric to make sure it is lying flat and without any wrinkles. Then pin again to secure the fabric to the foam cup. Stitch the lining to the foam fabric as close to the edge as possible. To make the bustier band, you'll need to cut 2 front pieces on fold and 4 pieces for the back. And that means 2 pieces for each side. Stitch together the double layered pieces, just like we did for the cups. Sew the pieces together with wrong sides facing each other. And yes, this may seem unconventional, but the seam will be covered later with the ribbon, and that results in a clean and polished finish on the inside of the bustier. And in addition to that, this technique helps to prevent the power mesh from scratching or irritating your skin.
Searching for the
Next, we will be adding the ribbons to the bustier band to create a channel for the boning. The ribbon that I am using is 9 millimeters wide, and I can fit a 4 millimeters boning in it. But you can choose any ribbon you prefer, it actually only depends on your boning size. To transfer the ribbon's position from the paper to the fabric, you can use a tracing wheel, or as I did, place the paper pattern behind the fabric and then pin the ribbon to the fabric using the paper pattern as a guide. The same is for the back piece. For the opposite side of the bustier band, simply turn the band over to the wrong side, then place the paper pattern behind the fabric. Draw a line and then pin the ribbon to the right side by following the line. The position of the ribbon is actually up to your preference, whether you want it to be perpendicular to the waistline or maybe you just want it on the sides. It's all up to your design. Stitch the ribbon on both sides as close to the edge as possible, but leave enough space for the boning to fit through the hole. Remember to leave the ribbon on the side seam for later. Find the lowest part of the cup. The lowest part of the cup should face towards the lowest part of the band, and that is the center. As you can see, here are the lowest part and here are the highest part, and the highest part should match the highest part of the band. And with the right sides together, pin the cups into the band, making sure to match the notches. It may seem like the cup is larger, but that's not the case. That is because of the seam allowance, and when we cut it later, everything will be perfect. Now you just have to push it in place and trust the notches. Make sure that the fabric lies flat. And then sew the cup to the band. Insert the wire into the underwire channel and use an iron to shape it. I will include a link in the description box where I purchased these balconette underwires. You can select these underwires based on the size of your pattern, or you can match the wires you already have with your pattern. Leave a little extra space before cutting off the excess channel. Repeat this process for the other wire. Take the wire out of the channel and pin it to the seam allowance of the cup. And sew the channel following the existing seam as closely as possible. Now you can cut off the seam allowance and also the foam. Be careful not to cut the stitch that you just made.
Put
press the underwire channel down over the seam allowance and sew it to the band. To make loops on the back of the bustier, you have to turn the bustier to the wrong side and mark approximately every second centimeter. And that is where you are going to attach the loops. Cut the ribbon into 5 centimeter long pieces. And then place every piece on the marked point. Pin it. Fold it in half. Make sure the two ends meet evenly. And pin again. Do that all the way down on both sides. It should end up like this. Make sure there are the same numbers of the loops on both sides. Now sew the loops with 1 centimeter seam allowance. We also need to add boning on the back of the bustier, and that is to prevent the fabric from curling together when the bustier is tightened. First, we're going to sew the ribbon onto the loops. Trim the seam allowance as much as you can. Turn the ribbon to the right side. Then press it down.
You can never walk alone on your way to being free. Where are you? Where are you?
On your way to being free.
Sew the other side of the ribbon. This will create a channel for the boning. To cover the top and bottom edge of the bustier, we will use the last pattern pieces. Start at the center of the bustier. Make sure to fold the sides of the strips to hide the raw edges of the fabric. And with the right sides together, pin and then sew the strip to the bustier using approximately 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. Fold the strip over the raw edge and gently press it down with your iron.
On your way to being free.
Then pin it in place. And this step is delicate, so you take your time to ensure that this strip is attached. And sew it down with a straight stitch. Make sure to catch both sides of the strip. Before moving on to the next step, we need to insert the underwires into the cups. Make sure that you place the underwires correctly, and just remember that the lowest part of the underwires is always the center of the cup. And don't worry if the cup appears slightly distorted or deformed at this point. It will be properly shaped after ironing it. And now we can move on and add the strips to the top part. Before we can close the bottom part of the bustier, we need to add boning to the channels. And to do this, measure the length of the boning by laying it on the channel and cut it 1 centimeter shorter so that there is space to sew the bottom together. And to smooth out the edges of the boning, you can warm it up slightly with a lighter. Once you have cut the boning to the right length and smoothed the edges, you can insert it into the boning channel. It's also important to add boning to the back part of the bustier, where we have our loops. Simply measure and cut the boning to the right length and insert it into the channel, just like we did for the front. And this will help to keep the bustier from bunching up when it is tied in the back. To straighten the boning, you can gently press it with a warm iron on a low heat setting. However, do not use your hands to cool it down as I do, and instead use a cloth to cool down the boning after pressing it. And that is especially if you use the metal ones.
But you can never walk alone on your way to being free. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? But you can never walk alone.
But you can never walk alone on your way to being free.
Where are you? But you can never walk alone on your way to being
And the last step is to close the bottom part of the bustier with the strip.
never walk alone on your way to being free. Where are you? But you can never walk alone on your way to being free. Where are you? But you can never walk alone on your way to being free. Where are you? Where are you?
Give the bustier a good ironing to make it look perfect. If you would like extra security for the fabric on the top part of the cup, you can choose to either hand stitch it or use the machine. However, this step is optional. On the back of the bustier, I am using the same ribbon as on the rest of the bustier. The bustier is ready. Please let me know if you have any feedback or suggestions for improvement. I would love to hear them. I tried to be very detailed in this tutorial, but please let me know if you think there were too many or too few details. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.